Spectrum is actually the resource that is required by the ICT sector. Firstly, to provide and roll out the coverage, the infrastructure that is required to give everybody access to connectivity. And secondly, to make sure that the connectivity that is provided is of the quality and the speeds that will enable people to get the kind of services that they can meaningfully participate in the digital economy. So let's start with what does it mean when it's released. Firstly, when it is released, it means you will have much more wider coverage, what we in the industry refer to as universal coverage. So it would mean that the industry or the industry players would then be able to cover even the most rural of areas and provide data coverage to those areas, the areas that they are not able to provide coverage to. Secondly, it would then also mean that they would be able to provide you the kind of speeds that they currently cannot provide you with. But more importantly, because the lack of access to spectrum is one of the highest input costs for the ICT sector, it would also then mean that they will then be able to drop prices, or at least that would be the expectation from a regulatory perspective, that it would then mean that it would cost them less to provide the services or the data services than it is costing them currently. And we would then expect them to pass on those cost savings to consumers and release the pressures that everybody feels. But from a 5G perspective, again, here you're talking about the type of speeds that we have not typically seen in the past. But again, that is a different category of spectrum than the spectrum that the president spoke about this morning. And he also mentioned the 5G spectrum, and that is really the spectrum that we're looking at for the future, probably beyond 2019, 2020. And that is really about the digital revolution, higher data throughputs, that will basically revolutionize the entire sector as we know it. So the availability of the spectrum would certainly mean that we would be able to open up the sector and allow new entrants into the market. One of the key policy proposals that has been put on the table by government is to say that when we release the spectrum, there should be a new wholesale open access network established. And that open access network would then be a wholesale player. It would be an entity that will be competing with the established network operators. That entity will build a network, and its role would be to enable service-based competition. So you will have an entity that will build a network and allow those people who want to provide innovative services to enter the market without building a network and compete with the other service providers and be able to offer us retail services, hopefully at competitive prices, without necessarily having to invest in the network infrastructure at huge costs. So this has certainly become a priority for us. So what the cabinet announcement has really done is to say, between us and the Department of Telecommunications and Postal Services, is to say that we must resolve the court dispute that we had as of 2016. So in 2016, we tried to license the spectrum as ICASA, and then we were sort of entangled in a dispute with the department. And that dispute has been hanging until now that cabinet has pronounced. It gives us the opportunity to resolve that dispute, and then it also then allows us to prioritize the release of the spectrum and make sure that we facilitate the licensing process. I think realistically, again, taking the cue from what the president was saying, and the fact that the process ought to unfold in a consultative manner, I would say maybe next year by this time you probably would have the licensing process completed. So the consultative process must start hopefully in the next month or two, but ultimately the actual issuing of the licenses should be done by this time next year. I think once the spectrum is released, the networks are ready, at least from the established operator side. Their networks are ready. All they need is the spectrum to switch on their full networks and deliver the speeds that are required and deliver the kind of coverage that the rural areas need. I think the only area that might require a bit of work is that wholesale open access network operator, which must then be established. Obviously, it has to be a consortium of operators, and once it is established, it must then hopefully build a network. But before it builds that network, obviously we have to come up with a regulatory framework that will allow it to have access to the established infrastructure. So I expect that the benefits might start flowing sooner or a lot quicker as soon as the licensing process is completed, at least from the established operator side.